Hello everyone, welcome to the Adkup Show. So picture this, Pakistan, a nuclear-armed nation of almost 250 million people, sitting at the crossroad of Asia, crumbles. Provinces break away, the government collapses, and chaos erupts. The fallout would devastate economies, redraw borders, and shake the world. Today we are diving deep into what happens if Pakistan disintegrates, economically and geopolitically. This isn't just a thought experiment, it's happening in real time. Pakistan is a country you can't ignore, and by that I mean it's the world's fifth most populous nation, with almost 250 million people, most of them young and ambitious. It's one of the only 9 countries with nuclear weapons, about 170 warheads, enough to make any crisis a global headline. However, when it comes to trade, business, and innovation, Pakistan is not really an important player. But still, its geography is what makes it important. It's a linchpin in China's Belt and Road Initiative with over $62 billion of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, which promised roads, ports, and power plants. It's a bridge between South Asia, Central Asia, and the Middle East, sharing borders with India, China, Afghanistan, and Iran. But here's the catch. Pakistan is walking a tightrope. Its economy is crumbling, its politics is corrupt, and ethnic tensions in places like Balochistan and Sindh are normal. So what happens if it all falls apart? If provinces secede or the central government collapses? The consequences would be catastrophic. We are talking economic collapse, regional wars, and probably even a nuclear risk, but that's far-fetched. So let's break this down into 2 parts. First, the economic fallout, like what happens to Pakistan's market, people, and future. Then the geopolitical ripple effects, about how the world would react to it. To understand why this matters, let's zoom in. Pakistan's economy is already on life support. Public debt is over 80% of the GDP. That's like owning more than your house is worth. Foreign exchange reserves are just $7 to $8 billion, barely enough for a few weeks of imports. And 50% of population lives below the poverty line. Add to that separatist movements in Balochistan, political gridlock, and a military that's both a stabilizer and a power player. And you have got a country on the edge. If it disintegrates, say through civil war or provinces breaking away, the fallout would be like a domino effect, toppling economies and stability across Asia. I know this sounds insane, but that's what it seems like gonna happen in near future. Let's start with the economic fallout, and trust me, it's grim. If Pakistan disintegrates, the immediate impact would be an economic collapse that makes the 2008 financial crisis look like a hiccup. Imagine this. Provinces like Sindh, Punjab, or Balochistan declare independence or descend into chaos. The central government, which holds the economy together, vanishes. What happens next? First, trade grinds to a halt. Pakistan's economy leans heavily on Karachi's port in Sindh, which handles 60% of its trade. Think $25 billion in textile and agriculture export. If Sindh breaks away or fighting disrupt the port, those exports will stop. Supply chain for food, fuel, and medicines collapse, and cities like Lahore and Islamabad could face shortages. Picture empty shelves and skyrocketing prices. Second, the currency crashes. The Pakistani rupee has already lost 50% of its value since 2020. Without the central bank, it becomes worthless. Hyperinflation kicks in. Think Weimar Germany or Zimbabwe. where a loaf of bread costs a wheelbarrow of cash. People might turn to bartering or local currencies, but that's chaos, not a solution. Third, investors run for the hill. Pakistan is already struggling to attract foreign direct investments. FDI is barely $2 billion a year for a country of 250 million people. Disintegration would kill projects like CPEC, China's flagship investments. Billions in loans for roads and power plants would left into limbo. And here's the kicker. Pakistan owes more than $80 billion in external debt over the next 3 years. Without a government to negotiate with the IMF, China, or Saudi Arabia, default is guaranteed. The $7 billion IMF bailout from 2023 is one. No money, no reforms, no hope. This isn't just a recession, it's a humanitarian disaster waiting to happen. Let's put this in perspective. Pakistan's 2022 flood displaced 33 million people and costed $40 billion. Disintegration could be worse. Agriculture, which employs 40% of the workforce, would collapse without irrigation systems or transport networks, and not to mention, Pakistan is an agrarian economy. Energy shortages, already a daily struggle, would worsen as CPEC power plants stall and millions could be displaced, flooding cities or crossing borders. Poverty is already over 50%, which could hit 70% or more. Imagine families unable to buy food, hospitals without medicines, and schools closed. This is what happens when a country's economic backbone snaps. And it's not just Pakistan's problem. Neighboring countries like India and Afghanistan would feel the shockwaves with refugee flow into Afghanistan and trade disruptions. Before we move to the medium-term effect, let me ask you, how do you think Pakistan's people would cope with this? Drop your thought in comments because this is where things get even more complicated. So people who think that everything will be fine after Pakistan disintegrates need to know the reality. We know what happened after USSR collapsed. Now let's fast forward to 2 to 10 years, what we call the medium term. If Pakistan splits into smaller states, each region faces a unique fight for its own survival. Punjab, with half of the population and most of the farmland, might scrap by as an agricultural hub, but it won't be self-sufficient. Sindh could leverage Karachi's port to become a trade player, but only if it avoids internal chaos. And the way things are going, internal chaos is inevitable. Balochistan, which is rich in minerals like copper and gas, sounds promising, but it's sparsely populated and lacks infrastructure. These new states would face a brutal reality. Smaller economies mean higher costs. Think duplicated governments, fractured markets, and no shared infrastructure like highways or power grids. It's like trying to run a business with half the staff and none of the tools. Then there is human capital. Pakistan's biggest asset and its biggest risk. Well, it's not really an asset, but anyways, with a median age of 22, the youth bulge could drive growth, but not if unemployment already at 8 to 10% doubles. Education is already a mess. 1/3 of kids are out of schools. Healthcare is worse. 40% children are stunted. Disintegration would gut social services, driving brain drain as doctors and engineers flee. Gender gaps, already wide, would worsen, locking women out of the workforce. And that CPEC project of $62 billion dream of roads and power plants would likely stall as China would redirect those funds to other stable regions. Regional trade deals like TAPI gas pipeline would collapse, isolating these new states. The result would be a patchwork of struggling economies, each fighting for scraps. This will result in depopulation and poverty at an industrial scale. Those short-term problems which I talked about would continue to expand and make the region worse. Now let's look long-term, 10 years and beyond. Without structural reforms, these successor states inherit Pakistan's baggage, corruption, weak institutions, and reliance on foreign assistance, which means their sovereignty will be compromised. Poverty could stay above 50%, and people who won't be poor would be in position just to survive. The rich people would have already left the country. Water disputes over the Indus River could spark conflicts between regions. Think Punjab versus Sindh fighting over every drop, and West, which is KPK, and Balochistan would face even more crises because of lack of resources. Climate change, like the 2022 floods, would make recovery even harder. But here's the glimmer of hope. Smaller states would tailor reforms to their strength. Sindh could become a trade hub, Punjab an agricultural powerhouse, maybe even Balochistan could tap its mineral with foreign help. Pakistan's diaspora, sending $30 billion in remittances yearly, could invest in rebuilding. But this assumes strong leadership, and Pakistan's history of coup after coup, scandal after scandal, doesn't inspire confidence. More likely, we would see chronic underdevelopment, with successor states limping along like post-Yugoslav Balkans, but with higher stakes. So what do you think? Could these new states rise from ashes, or are they doomed to fail? Let me know in comments, because next we are diving into geopolitical fallout, and it's even more scarier. Now let's talk geopolitics, because Pakistan's disintegration would be a global crisis, and the biggest fear will be those 170 nuclear warheads. If the central government collapses, then who will control those 170 nukes? The military, which has run Pakistan for half of its history, or separatists in Balochistan? Or even worse, terrorists like Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, who have attacked military bases before? Well, the risk of nuclear weapons falling in the wrong hands would send shockwaves from Washington to Beijing to Moscow. Pakistan might launch preemptive strikes to secure them, risking all-out war. China, with billions invested in Pakistan, would want to protect its asset at Gwadar port. The US, still scarred from Afghanistan, would focus on counter-terrorism but would avoid ground troops. Any misstep could escalate into regional or even global conflict. Then there is the neighborhood. India would face chaos along its 3,000 kilometers border, terrorism and unrest in its own Punjab and Kashmir regions. Afghanistan's Taliban government would struggle with cross-border militants, especially the TTP, who have grown bolder since 2021. Iran could see separatist unrest in its Baloch region if Pakistan's Balochistan breaks away. This isn't just Pakistan's problem, it's a South Asian nightmare that could destabilize a quarter of the world's population. And don't forget the human cost. Millions of refugees could flood Afghanistan, Iran, and then Europe, overwhelming borders and economies. This is where the whole world holds its breath. However, chances of nukes falling into wrong hands is close to impossible, because Pakistan's military has massive influence of the US and Britain, who would simply take over their nukes by building pressure on them. The 2019 Balakot airstrikes showed how fast tensions escalate. Now imagine that with no central government to negotiate. That's scary. And it's not just nukes. Pakistan's collapse would disrupt global trade routes and energy projects, hitting economies from Dubai to Delhi. Well, not really Delhi. 2 to 10 years out, the geopolitical picture gets messier. Pakistan's tribal areas and Balochistan, already home to militants, would become ungoverned black holes. Groups like the TTP or Islamic State Khorasan could expand. launching attacks into India, Afghanistan, Iran, China, and Russia. Then there is a great power scramble. China, which sees Pakistan as a counterweight to India, which is not true in reality, but they try to prop up Pakistan against India all the time. They would lose its ally. The $62 billion CPEC project would stall, forcing Beijing to pivot to Southeast Asia or Africa. The US would appease India to counter China, turning South Asia into a Cold War-style chessboard. Russia might exploit the chaos to gain influence in Central Asia, while Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, who have lent billions of dollars to Pakistan, would shift focus to India. Refugees would keep pouring out, millions heading to Iran or Europe, straining global migration system. Humanitarian aid would be a mess, with NGOs and the UN struggling with lawless zones. This is a region on fire, and the world's powers are picking sides. In the long term, which is beyond 10 years, we could see new states emerge. A balut state might align with Iran or Gulf countries, tapping its mineral wealth. Sindh could try to go it alone as a trade hub, leveraging Karachi. Punjab, with Pakistan's military legacy, might claim the title of Pakistan 2.0. But these states would be weak, propped up by foreign powers and prone to conflicts. The Durand line with Afghanistan could vanish, merging Pashtun areas, but that's a long shot with Taliban in charge. India would emerge as South Asia's unchallenged power. China's Belt and Road would take a hit while US shift focuses to Indo-Pacific. The Muslim world would lose a key voice, and global forums like UN feel the ripple effects. This is the world reshaped by Pakistan's collapse. By the way, achieving this stability is pretty much impossible. The region of Pakistan will pretty much continue to be chaotic. So finally, could this actually happen? Well, Pakistan's military, one of the world's strongest, has a track record of stepping in during crisis. Think coups in 1958, 1977, and 1999. It might impose martial law or back a Punjab-centric state to prevent total collapse. But the military is also stretched thin, fighting insurgents like TTP, managing a broken economy and juggling ties with China, the US, and Saudi Arabia. Ethnic tensions are real. Balut separatists bomb CPEC projects, Sindhi nationalists demand autonomy, and Pashtuns feel alienated. Climate change is another wild card. The 2022 flood displaced 33 million people and costed over $40 billion. More disaster could push Pakistan over the edge. Can it be stopped? Well, nothing is impossible, but it's a tall order. Economically, Pakistan needs to stabilize itself. That means sticking to IMF reforms, restructuring debts, and reviving CPEC. Politically, it needs to bridge ethnic divides, maybe through federalism or power sharing. Climate resilience is critical, better dams, irrigation, and disaster planning. The international community, China, the US, and the UN has a stake in helping. But Pakistan's history of corruption and mistrust makes this tough. The clock is ticking and the world is watching. Here's the bottom line. Pakistan's been through crises before, wars, coups, floods, and it's still standing. But now things have changed a lot, and disintegration isn't just possible, it's plausible. I mean, it looks like Pakistan has accumulated too many problems and everything is now exploding. Even the US or UK don't have billions of dollars to bail out this country of 250 million people. If Pakistan disintegrates, the economic fallout would plunge millions into poverty, collapse trade, and stall development for generations. Markets would crash, debt would default, and humanitarian crisis would overwhelm the region, leading to disease and deaths. Geopolitically, it's even worse. Nuclear risks, regional wars, and the reshaped global order. India might gain, China and US would scramble, while refugees and militants destabilize Asia. This isn't just about Pakistan, it's about the stability of a quarter of the world's population. This is a wake up call for the leaders, neighbors, and the world. That's it for today's deep dive. By the way, whatever I have discussed is just basic. In reality, it will be far worse. There are many things which I didn't discuss which will happen in that region, socially, politically, and religiously. So, what do you think? How bad the situation in Pakistan will be? Hit that like button if this got you thinking. Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more such videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay curious. Peace out.